Hey guys,
What?
Adrian liked to hum at the end. She liked to hum the melody of the chorus at the end.
Good.
So if you can, melody of the chorus.
So we do.
So a couple more times. So you sing the chorus a couple times at the end, and then you hum the chorus. A couple
So do you
times.
want to go through the whole thing twice, both verses twice,
No.
and then go to hum it?
I would say if we want to do more than just the two verses, I would just do the first verse one more time.
Okay.
Yeah.
First verse, chorus, second
So
verse, chorus, first verse,
two,
chorus,
verse one, chorus, chorus,
chorus, hum, hum, hum.
I also, I don't know, is this over-arranging, but I love the way it sounded.
Yeah,
We're just playing maybe towards either at the beginning or the end,
Oh, for sure.
or both. Maybe just take it. And then we'll, let's run it from the,
Mike is going to bring two things.
oh, whatever. Yeah.
You want to do it again, or let's do the other one? I think we're right with this
We
one.
have time, let's do it.
What time is it?
It's 29.
So let's do this, let's run this one more time. Do you want, maybe just Avi start, or are you cool?
Sure.
Maybe you should stand by the mic.
Are we going to be standing or sitting in our seats? And we should definitely get a mic. Or...
Oh, no, we should come.
We should stand
I think we should stand. Frank was saying do it for instance, but I think it'll be more focused.
There's two microphones that are at the sort of the demo where everyone's going to be speaking from, and we're recording professionally, so
Gather around.
Yeah.
keep it around there. Everyone can see you.
Okay.
C, maybe we should try this also in D minor. See what,
Okay.
Michael?
Is Winnie here?
Should we do the English in this one?
Let's. Can somebody get Winograd?
Second?
You remember these chords?
I do.
You know,
Jeff, maybe we can start with the, that melody for the third section.
can you even the whole? Do you want to maybe just even just do the whole thing and then do the song and then do the
Then both the okay.
Because it ends on a D. I don't know if you want to.
You don't want to maybe start with the whole thing first, then go into the verse, and then go into the whole verse, and we can do it a couple times. I mean, she also wrote Hebrew lyrics, she also wrote English lyrics.
Yeah.
There was
Right.
Russian also.
I never saw, I
I
never,
do
I
that, I
don't know.
like that idea of starting with English.
Just do the whole thing.
Because
Everyone has.
Right, and even if it's very unsung and kind of unstructured and maybe,
Yeah.
And lots of, and people maybe who don't
People
actually
know
know,
it.
they know that.
Right. And, yeah.
so maybe
Yeah,
start
if
from
you
the
just
top.
Go to the four there?
Where?
Yeah.
Just go to the G minor.
Do we know the
Lu Hayali Koach.
The melody goes to the D.
And if my voice will ever, if my voice will ever,
Variations of that, but let's
Say again,
let's,
Hebrew?
let's, like,
Lu Hayali Koach. Right.
Those are not these words to sing, but it's.
Lu Hayali
I would
Koach.
take this straight.
Lu Hayali Koach.
Haiti
Everything
Rasta?
good?
Lu Hayita Ratzah. Barechov.
Haiti Rasta Barakov. Haiti Shalom.
So I could shalom, shalom,
Do you have
shalom.
chords you want to dictate?
No, you know, Avi knows.
So let's follow
Yeah.
Avi. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you know,
Simple.
simplify them. I mean, basically, when we record them, we put two different on top of each other. Just choose one.
Let's just, yeah, I think
Was that the-
it's kinda good.
Choose the one that works with both melodies.
Yeah.
Right. So staying on the one. What key are we doing?
D minor. So, should we run this from the top?
So here's a question. So those who know the Hebrew lyrics should sing the Hebrew lyrics. Those who know the English lyrics should sing the English lyrics. Those who don't should not sing.
Right.
But what order should we do them in?
English, Hebrew. No,
Oh,
sorry.
Yiddish.
Yiddish,
Yiddish.
Hebrew, English.
Okay.
And sing out Louise on the Hebrew.
And then Yiddish again.
And then Yiddish again.
And Yiddish again. All right, so let's start with the
And we're
English.
starting with an English.
And, great. Okay.
So you started, we'll.
So that both the A section and the B section of the name go into.
So wait from the.
We could also just start singing. I mean, we don't have to hold our.
Yeah.
Let's not hold it.
Right. bounce off something?
It felt strange to go right on to the Hebrew.
Yeah.
I think we did twice on the Yiddish,
Twice on
do
the
the Navy,
Yeah.
and the
Twice on
Hebrew.
Yeah, we do.
Right, so-
Once in English.
Once in Hebrew, once in English.
Yeah, but the Yiddish is,
All right,
everyone knows
Yiddish,
that.
so do
Yiddish
2
twice.
verses of the Yiddish,
And-
go back into the Niggun,
Yeah.
Hebrew,
Niggun,
Niggun,
English.
English, Niggun, Yiddish.
Niggun.
What about just Hebrew, English?
Oh, yeah.
Hebrew,
Yeah,
English,
Hebrew,
Niggun.
English.
Yiddish.
That way it's always.
Okay.
It's on AA, so it's all
Yeah.
Good.
On the way out, I think we can do the.
Say again,
voltage.
Hebrew.
On the way out, we can layer the bunch of the different parts. We can. Some people can sing voltage, and some people can sing yada da da da.
Okay.
And so I just.
No, okay.
Can someone lead? I mean, just like, just like, just say, Hebrew, just quietly. Or,
Okay.
Joanne, well, it seems like you have a good grasp of this.
Okay,
song.
so we'll
Can
do
you?
Joanne?
Niggun, Yiddish, Yiddish, Niggun, Hebrew, English, Niggun,
Yiddish.
Yiddish, Yiddish,
Yeah.
twice Yiddish,
and-
and then layer, and
Layer,
then
layer.
you know.
And if this is participatory, because this is participatory,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I think it's totally fine to just speak, to encourage everyone, Yiddish, we're gonna do 2 verses, and say it pretty explicitly.
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about us as far as the layering. I'm concerned about its comprehensibility in a big echoey space like the sanctuary.
I think it's just the last verse, though. I think it's only gonna.
Okay.
I think I could be happy with the joyful noise.
Should the instruments drop out of the last verse?
The Yiddish
They'll have heard
polyphony.
it. They'll have heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess not comprehensibility, but just the people knowing what's happening.
Right.
Do you want to do the B flat A minor at that time too?
I
You wanna save it
don't
for
remember.
later?
Should
Mu
we? Would you
hayam
like it?
mikoa.
I think it's nice.
Hayiti
Hayiti
rasta morecha. Hayiti rasta
Okay. I mean, I kind of like the fact that it was
All right.
different from the.
I think maybe we're okay.
Before you
now.
were playing the minor.
Although I finished time. Don't worry.
That's your brother, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, I think everyone will sing. I think everyone will know it to do. And if we kind of, all right.
Okay.
We should meet only on happier occasions.
That's right. It's a very nice band.
As I like to say,
It's a very nice band, yeah. That's it. I think someone should start a band. Here's a band name, Nor Simchas.
No,
That's the name of the band. Nor
The band that should
Simchas.
never have any gigs.
that's right.
that'd be a good way to keep it, right? Keep people from getting hired.
Pirate you?
This is like an unbelievable day. And I'm taking the tissues and
Take
you
all the
can't
tissues.
stop me. Let's take them all.
It's,
Yeah. This holiday's always gonna suck.
I will never celebrate Christmas ever again. That's it for Christmas. Divorcing Christmas.
Unsurprisingly, we're going to begin musically.
Feine, gute Leid,
one of the best teachings in rabbinic tradition goes like this: Kol hamorid dimaot al adam kasher hakadosh baruch hu sofran umenichan beveit ginzav. Whenever anybody sheds tears at the loss of a wonderful person, God numbers up the tears and puts them into God's bank vault. God's bank vault is not filled with money. No diamonds, no gold. God's bank vault is filled with human tears shed in love at loss. I hope that this space today will be a space in which God grows richer, in which we get to shed our tears in love for somebody whose passing leaves the world a much smaller place. Chana Freda, Bat Bela Buni, Menachem Mendel. If people are blessed to live well, life can be very, 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 very small and very, 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 very big. It can be as small and private as two people holding hands. It can be a tiny seed tucked into the ground to grow. And it can be big and massive and unmovable, like an oak tree with deep roots and wide branches, sheltering and strong. Adrian lived in both of these ways. And we're going to say goodbye to a very, very small, private and intimate and tender life, and a very, very public life, loud and musical and funny and joyful and learned. Today, the people who knew her very, very well, of which I am not one, will tell you about her, their own memories. And I invite you to think about a full and rounded life. You think about a child. You think about a young woman and an older one. Think about a mother and a daughter, a sister, a lover, a friend, a teacher. Think about somebody in Chicago, in California, in Jerusalem, in this city. Some of you will remember in this room that for years, this is before I came to this shul, for years her participation in Yom Kippur was part of this community's life. Somebody who davened and somebody who knew how to bring Yiddish to davening and make that a part of Yom Kippur. You know, think about somebody speaking English and speaking Hebrew and speaking Yiddish. You want to think about somebody who was an activist who took as her personal motto the motto of one of the organizations where she worked with such devotion. She was an activist for a Sheiner und Bessere Welt. She was a performer and a scholar. And all those had many public roles. And there's also the private and tender, the person who was a great cook, who loved to have you in her home, who brought people together for legendary and very lengthy Sidarim, filled with innumerable songs. Somebody who was tough and somebody who was gentle. Somebody who was healthy. And finally, somebody who was sick, to fight a very implacable and very aggressive and very rare disease. The sages say that the mitzvah of v'ahavta l'orecha kamocha, to love your neighbor as yourself, one of the ways you can turn that into a deed is to help them have a good death. I don't know if any death is really good. All deaths are painful, painful for the person and painful for those they love, but I heard about a rare death this week of somebody who, even though she was not capable of opening her eyes and talking, was surrounded in her hospital room by 30 people who wanted to be with her in her very last moments on this earth. People are what they contribute to this world. But it is important to say that everybody is more than what they do. They are what they are. And a full life is not just what you do, and not just what you're known for, and not just what you're famous for, and not just what they would write about, even though it is wonderful that people will be written about in various publications, paper and electronic. A full life is not just what you do, it's what you are. And a full life is so much more that can be held in a box, either the box that now lies in California, or the words that people can say. People will talk about Adrienne for her tremendous public contribution to Jewish life and Jewish culture. And of course she was deeply and utterly and passionately Jewish. And it's important to say, as her friends and family told me, that it wasn't just about being Jewish. It was about being human. And for all the intensity of her Jewish connections, today can't go without mentioning how connected she was to the Chinese American Jewish community and her work at the Museum of the Chinese Experience in America. And everybody knows that she was an amazing presenter of Yiddish culture. But as Sarah told me, and I think it's important to stress, Adrienne was not a preservationist, not about preserving something from the past. She's about being a creator, and whose real artistry is helping people discover who they are in culture. Discover yourself, discover who you might become. She helped people connect with each other. She was all about community, helping culture be a vessel by which people would discover who they might be and connect with themselves and connect with other people. She had a great gift for connecting with people, no matter what their age and background. And as Frank London suggested to me, this explains why she loved language so much. Because if you get inside language, you discover that that's where people can be together, and where they can meet, and where they can communicate. Adrienne was a very open-hearted person, someone who loved people. You know, the Talmud has a Rip Van Winkle story. It has a story about a guy who sleeps for 40 years. And then he wakes up, and he dies of heartbreak because he has no more friends. And the punchline of that story is, O chavruta o mituta. It's either friendship or death. Well, we can't avoid death. It comes whether we want it or not. But we are here saying goodbye to somebody who chose chavruta, who chose togetherness, and who chose friendship. It's hard not, on January 1st, it's hard not to think about endings and beginnings. One passage ending and a new one beginning. One chapter closing and another one being ripped open. To the extent that life is an integrated and woven fabric, there are special people in the world who help you weave it together. And so we're saying goodbye to somebody who wove a lot of people together. And that chapter's over. And it's our job to hang on to it as long as possible, with as much intimacy as possible, both by carrying forward the way that she functioned in your life and playing that role for other people, and by telling stories. We'll have an opportunity for you to do that. Following the conclusion of today's ceremony, we'll have an opportunity for you, and I'll explain that later, for how you can do that on video later. But it is true that we have to say goodbye to the real living flesh and blood person. And a new chapter is opening. And we have to rip it open. We have a ritual in this religion that when somebody dies, we express the rip in life with a rip in clothing. And the only people who are expected necessarily to do those things are our immediate family members, but everybody can choose to act out the rip in the fabric of life with a rip in the fabric of your clothing. So I know that to at least a certain group of people, a message went out inviting you to wear something today that you wouldn't mind ripping. I'm sure that we could go all throughout the room, but I would like to ask that small number of people, if they chose to, in a moment, to stand up, and we'll act that out. And if you everywhere in the room where you want to be, you want to do that too, I won't stop you, although the mechanical means we'll keep to the front of the room here. And I'd like you to think about, as you do that, I'd like you to think about the way your life's ripped, and the way the integrating fabric of your life is ripped, and it won't be the same anymore. And I'd like you to think about when you rip, in some way you're displaying your broken heart. And sometimes hearts are broken down. But I'd also like you to think, at least just a little bit of a resonance in this act, to also think about the way that hearts can be broken open. And sometimes you tear something and it tears open. We're saying goodbye to a very open-hearted person. And as you tear your clothing, just think a little bit about how you might tear your heart to be as open as hers was. So those who received that email, if they would like to, I invite you to rise. Or you don't have to. As I said, most of today will be devoted to the words of those who knew Adrian very, very well as friends and colleagues, and we'll begin with Jeffrey Chandler.
I'm looking around the room and I see so many people that I know and so many people that I love, and I realize that I probably would not know any of you, including my partner of 24 years, if it weren't for Adrian. And that's because she was my ambassador, my point of entry to Yiddishland. She encouraged me to do more than just make a brief visit, but to become, if you will, a regular resident. And it's largely thanks to her encouragement and support that I started graduate studies in Yiddish, that I worked with her at YIVO for several years, and that I began writing and translating. And I say this not only to express my profound debt to her, my profound personal debt to her, but because I know that in this I'm far from being alone. One of Adrian's many gifts was fostering and inspiring people interested in Yiddish culture or Jewish music or progressive politics to get involved, to learn more, to develop their talents, and to make creative leaps. And she did this best by modeling what was possible as she moved effortlessly, or so at least it seemed, across boundaries of art making and scholarship and activism and institution building. And for her, there really weren't boundaries between them. What Adrian did could seem like a very daunting example because you had to be informed and creative and relevant and engaged And you weren't supposed to simply copy what other people did. You were supposed to make a contribution of your own. And at the same time that she set this very high bar, she was also the model nurturer of new talents, encouraging so many of us to innovate and to take chances. And so it would be hard to overestimate the importance of what Adrienne did for Yiddish culture. I remember at a panel at the Museum of the City of New York a few years ago, she spoke about how she got involved in the Yiddish culture scene here in New York in the 1970s. And this was at a time that there were many people who saw Yiddish culture as having more or less ended. It was time to turn out the lights and close the door. But there were a handful of people like Adrienne, also Barbara Kirschenblatt, Mark Slobin, who didn't accept this, and they were trying to figure out what to do. And Adrienne said, what's a very provocative but powerful image, she said, well, they saw Yiddish culture as being like a patient in an emergency room. They felt that they had to do what ER doctors do, which is try everything all at once. They had to make an intensive, all-out, wide-ranging effort to animate this culture and see what works. And a lot did, both in ways that they anticipated and in ways that proved to be wonderful, wonderful surprises. I remember talking with Adrienne a number of years ago about watching Sarah and other young people her age who had grown up in the Yiddish culture scene as they were figuring out what all this meant to them. And they seemed to have come to a similar understanding that getting involved in Yiddish culture was something they didn't have to do, but it was something that they wanted to do, but it had to be on their own terms. And this was deeply satisfying to Adrienne, not only with regard to Sarah, but that Sarah wasn't alone in this. Moreover, thanks in large measure to Adrienne, this wasn't only possible for people who had grown up in this cultural milieu, it was possible for anyone. Whether or not they knew Yiddish, whether or not they were Jews, she held the door to Yiddish culture wide open. Finally, I think of how fearlessly Adrienne would give herself over to a song. There are few musicians I've ever heard who are as compelling. For me, the power of her singing was emblematic of how she took on all of her life's work. To see this cut short has been heartbreaking. Adrienne had a lot more living to do, and it will be harder for us to keep up what she inspired us to do. But she left us a great example to emulate. Kavod ihr Andenk.
Next, I'd like to call Sophia Goodhertz up. There you are.
Frank told me to just come up.
Okay, we'll do it that way.
So on Wednesday, just last week, when I stopped in to see her, she said, so, baby, here's the deal. Do you want to speak? About what? Us. Now? Sure. No, she said, at the funeral. So I started crying and I said no. So she was so matter-of-fact, so honest, and so direct. I read once that the Greeks didn't write obituaries, but instead at the end of someone's life simply asked, did they have passion? Yes, she had passion. She lived such a big life, a life of passion and excitement and wonder, a life filled with achievement and recognition and genius, a life with few regrets. She took the latest news from the doctors calmly, and then she made a decision to plan her funeral. Adrienne and I met at daycare when Sarah and Max were about 1. We were young. We became friends almost immediately. I'd never met anyone my age who wasn't an immigrant who spoke Yiddish. We talked almost every night after dinner. She was working at Evo then and knew more about my history than I did. I learned a new language from her. Damaged was the word she used to explain some of the stories I told about growing up in my immigrant community. My parents loved her when they met her. but what was not to love? Over the years, nearly half my life, we were close, then not, then close again. She listened to me cry when I was happy and sad, saw me through some terrible times, wonderful days, births and losses, always the loyal, perceptive friend, my ally, my advisor, my champion. And the thing about Adrienne is how smart she was, right? She had a way of putting together her sentences. I always wanted to write it down or tape what she said so I could remember and repeat it, When I told her that I'd cleaned the house because I was feeling depressed, done the laundry, or finished the ironing, and that it made me feel really good to wash the floors, because I felt like I had something to show for my day, an accomplishment. She called me refugee girl. When I'd get my hair cut, she would keep touching my head with her hand and run her hand down my cheek and shake her head at how short my hair was. These last few days, I found myself doing these things. I cleaned my house, I washed my floors, and I got a really short haircut. I miss her so. And things will be different now. And I'm so geht das Leben.
Sam Norwich is going to speak next, but before he does, I just want to say that we do have 2 additional earpiece things, hearing aid things. So if people would like them, I only have 2 more, so please raise your hand. We're also going to try to turn up the volume, and I would ask all the additional speakers to please try to speak with full volume. Okay. I'm going to send one over here and one over here.
That's mine like this. Leave it the way it is. Please. No.
Adrienne Cooper now lives in our memory. Many thousands will remember her concerts, her performances of song and theater, her luminous voice and knowing full-body renditions of everything from lullabies to protest songs, poems of loss, and songs of solidarity. Many scores will remember her as a mentor in the US, in Canada, in Russia, in Poland, in England, in Holland, in Israel. As a mentor, as a teacher who taught them not only how to sing it right, but often how to live it right. I will remember her as one of a few dozen people who had the schus, the privilege of working with Adrienne day to day from 1981 to 1989 at YIVO, and on many occasions during the years since, especially during the last 11 years of her various roles at the Workmen's Circle Arbeiter Ring. I hired Adrienne in 1981 as Assistant Dean of the Max Weinreich Center for Advanced Jewish Studies, after Yaja Zeltman left that position to work in a human rights organization. Her hiring was not really my call. It was Michal Herzog's, who was dean of the center and chair of the linguistics department at Columbia. Michal had gotten to know Adrienne in the late 70s, after she came to New York and to the Max Weinreich Center as a doctoral student in American Jewish history. 6 years later, when Hanne Frischdorf fell ill, I asked Adrian to step up to the role of assistant director of YIVO. That was my call. By then, I had come to appreciate her many gifts. Not only her rich voice, but also her intellectual heft, her sharp pen, her ability to do many things at once, and not least, her emotional presence and warmth. Adrian could tell when to push and when to stop. She knew how to celebrate our victories, how to make sure everyone who had contributed was properly thanked, how to pick up the pieces after a grant proposal or a budget plan had failed to get approval. In the 70s and 80s, the Uriel Weinreich Summer Program in Yiddish language, literature, and culture, headquartered at Columbia but run and funded by YIVO, functioned as a kind of undergraduate major in Yiddish studies, broadly conceived. She ran it. It was far more than an intensive language plan. It was far more than an intensive language ulpan. It was an introduction to the history and music and folklore and theater of Ashkenaz, of the 1,000 years of history and culture of the Jews of Europe and America. Some of its graduates went on to academic careers. Some of them are now in the prime of their careers or on the crest of it. I think of Janet Hada, of my sister Anita, of Steven Zipperstein, of Jeffrey Chandler, of Jack Kugelmass, of Nina Warnke, of Ulrike Kiefer, of Daniela Mantovan, and of so many others. She knew how to negotiate between professors and students, between YIVO's full-time staff who taught in that program, part-time staff who came for a semester from Israel, like Yechiel Sheintuch, like Avram Noverstern, people who taught at other universities who cross-listed their courses at YIVO so that people from other universities than theirs could take them, people like Robert Seltzer, like Benjamin Herzog, like Dan Miron. She got their lesson plans. She made sure that students understood what was expected of them, but mostly she worked with the students. She pulled them into YIVO's community. She gave them the support they needed when sometimes their professors didn't. She connected them with someone else who could give them something their professor could not. It was out of that experience that Kleskamp was born. It was her brainchild and Henry Sapoznik's, but it was she that persuaded me and others to back it. Kleskamp had its incubation for its first 10 years at YIVO. It was supposed to break even between grants and fees, but it never did. And year after year, we backed it because of what she made to happen. It was from her and from Barbara Kirschenblatt Gimblett that I learned one of the main lessons of my years at YIVO, that the transmission of our tradition from generation to generation is not a handing on. Es hat gar nichts zu tun mit Nachbarn die Eltern. Has nothing to do with aping your forebears. It's a struggle in which it only happens if you change it. Barbara Kirschenblatt Gimblett taught the lesson through a reading of Barbara Meyerhoff, of Barbara Meyerhoff's brilliant evocation, analysis of a Pesach Seder, of the struggle among 3 generations of one family over this ritual, of what language it was to be said in, of what was to be emphasized, of what we were to make of it. This is not an easy negotiation. The old generation is desperate for this to be carried on. Nobody was more desperate than the people at YIVO. But the young generation can't just take it as it is. They have to make it their own. And the old generation says, is what I'm giving you not good enough? You had to have courage in the 1980s, after the survivors were mostly gone, to make changes. Adrienne found the courage. She demonstrated it. She enacted it. The carrying on of tradition is not like should not be thought of as a potato sack race, where the old generation runs with the sack until they no longer can, and then sort of hand it off as it is to the next generation, and so on. It should be thought of as a moving tug of war in which you pull in opposite directions, and the worst thing you can do is to let go. You've got to keep pulling. That was the way she performed the song. She learned what it had meant, and she brought something of her own to it. That's how she taught others to perform. Adrienne now lives in our memory. The question is what we will do with it. Kavod ihr Andenken.
Before Tina and I read one of the poems that Adrienne taught us, I was looking at the recording Enchanted that Michael Winograd produced that she loved so much, and looking at the liner notes, and she wrote, in Love and Peace, Adrienne wrote, "Any day that life lets me knit together the history of psychoanalysis, puppet theater, early modern commerce, and Yiddish with the Hasidic master, the Baal Shem Tov, and a New York filmmaker-composer. Any day I can share the work of an eccentric, heavenly-voiced singer-songwriter in Kishinev, Moldova, and an elder poet inventing songs in her garden in the Bronx. A day when I make music with my daughter and a virtuosic 20-something otherwise found playing marimba in a skunk suit in the subway." A day when my voice is layered with the voices of my grandparents and mother recorded over 60 years ago. That's the kind of day I live for. The timeless, boundless, unexpected adventure of working in Yiddish.
She sang beyond the genius of the sea. The water never formed to mind or voice like a body, holy body, fluttering its empty sleeves, and yet its mimic motion made constant cry, caused constantly a cry that was not ours, although we understood, inhuman, of the veritable ocean. The sea was not a mask, no more was she. The song and water were not medleyed sound, even if what she sang was what she heard, since what she sang was uttered word by word. It may be that in all her phrases stirred the grinding water and the gasping wind, but it was she and not the sea we heard.
For she was the maker of the song she sang. The ever-hooded, tragic-gestured sea was merely a place by which she walked to sing. Whose spirit is this, we said, because we knew it was the spirit that we sought, and knew that we should ask this often as she sang. If it was only the dark voice of the sea that rose, or even colored by many waves, if it was only the outer voice of sky and cloud, of the sunken coral water-walled, however clear, it would have been deep air, the heaving speech of air, a summer sound repeated in a summer without end and sound alone. But it was more than that.
More even than her voice and ours among the meaningless plungings of water and the wind, theatrical distances, bronze shadows heaped on high horizons, mountainous atmospheres of sky and sea.
It was her voice that made the sky acutest at its vanishing.
She measured to the hour its solitude.
She was the single artificer of the world in which she sang.
And when she sang, the sea, whatever self it had, became the self that was her song, for she was the maker.
Then we, as we beheld her striding there alone, knew that there never was a world for her except the one she sang and singing made.
A few quick images of Adrienne Cooper, a citation, and a high-quality Cooper quote. It's 2000, it's snowing, and we meet at the service entrance connected to a maze of maintenance tunnels underneath a hotel in New England. We are pushing gigantic, odd-shaped road cases trying to find the freight elevator. Cooper is somehow already fully made up and wearing her Glickle of Hamel costume in which she looks like a medieval nun. We are in a space that, architecturally speaking, is the bottom. It's 1999. We're at a synagogue in suburban Port Washington, Long Island, where Cooper has been hired and is committed to intensify ritual. A crew of us are making the first of the total theater Purim spiel she will mentor for a decade. At the table, holding a serious dramaturgical meeting, are Cooper, George Konoff, one of America's greatest punchmen, that is a player of Punch and Judy, the world's oldest and wickedest puppet id unleashed, and Ariella Wurtzel, a teenager who has walked to the shoal in snow in 5-inch platform sandals. In September 2011, a few of us were visiting Miss Cooper. She wanted to feed us but asked that we cooked. I was in the kitchen preparing kasha. She in the living room on the couch where you can see the fairway sign flash. She smelled the progress and commanded me gently but firmly how to cook through the wall. In 2010, I had the honor of presenting Adrienne with a Marshall T. Myers Risk Taker Award for Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. And Myers was a rabbi who resisted the military junta in Argentina in many ways, including lying to prison officials about why he had to physically remove people from jails. He later became the lead rabbi in B'nai Jeshurun and was known among the B'nai Mitzvah crew as the Karen Finley of the pulpit. So we sort of, had to evoke Adrienne and her connection to this performance artist, political, fearless, creative, reckless type individual, not a stretch. But here are some excerpts from the citation, followed by Cooper's response. And this citation was written by myself and Jenny Levison. Adrienne Cooper has the voice of a diva and the soul of a Bundist. She is an interpreter, teacher, and translator of Yiddish song who for decades has gifted thousands of us with the reawakening of beauty and music. Her service has not just been to generations of students, but to music itself, music that holds the experience of diasporic peoplehood. In her work with Yiddish music, Cooper continues a political vision begun by cultural radicals in Eastern Europe. These activists built institutions like the Yiddish Wissenschaftlicher Institute, YIVO, and the priceless archive of Ashkenazi Jewry, where Adrienne worked throughout the 80s. During her decade of service to the YIVO, Adrienne was mentored, among others, by Bundist survivors who believed in an integrated Jewish culture that lives in the real world, and who were committed to the betterment of people in and outside the Jewish community. She's part of a legacy of Jews who rewrote history by building power and institutions grounded in what people were abundantly rich with, culture. Fearless guide to the cultural commons, who has made sure no one is excluded from this resource and that no power can silence it. She brings people, ideas, and buildings together to create spaces for unimaginable political joy and artistic joy. She is a forest of Jewish sound, a joyous crowd, a resistance fighter, a lover, I would add a flirt, a screaming rhetorical street poster, and a tzaddik. For all of this, and for never working from a place of chosenness or nostalgia, but from a place of justice and empathy and complex Yiddish polyphony, JFRID is deeply honored to present the 2010 Rabbi Marshall T. Meyer Risk-Taker Award to Adrienne Cooper. And then to this, Adrienne replied, "Oi!" And then the audience laughed. And then she went on to say, "I grew up in Oakland, California, in Rabbi Harold Schulweiss's synagogue. He was our local version of Marshall Meyer, an activist, an agitator, an inspiring intellect. I had a perch on the bima on Yom Kippur, a packed house, when he began a sermon on exploitative Jewish landlords with black tenants in Oakland. The family in the front row in the prime seats, the dollar seats, stood up, led by the landlord father, and headed up the aisles to leave. Rabbi Schulweiss told the ushers to lock the doors. And he told the family to sit down and to listen. They were trapped. They sat down. That single experience kept me a lifetime in Jewish community. That was what I expected Jewish life to be like: ethical, exciting, and dangerous. That's the kind of Jew I intended to be, and I have tried my best."
As the days pass with their aftershocks, the crater Adrienne's death has left in my heart has widened and deepened. And there's been nothing for it but to fill it with tears. Tears which change the vacancy and muteness of immediate grief into a reflecting pool. In the enormity of the loss I feel, I see just how far Adrienne's presence reaches into my life. And I draw comfort from being near those who were and are near to her. We need each other now, for each of us carries an aspect of Adrienne that, in reflecting her particular impact on us, reassembles and reflects her tremendous impact on the world. Last Pesach, I found myself haunted by a melody in which I had grown up in another century as a Gullus Yid, a diaspora Jew, floating in a folkshul above a kosher butcher shop across the South Bronx, back to Kasrilivke. Whereas yet unbeknownst to me, Adrian was acquiring mastery of the words and music through which our souls could come into their own and fully articulate something otherwise inexpressible, an ecstatic sorrow, a remarkable serenity amid misfortune, a fierce determination shot through with sadness, a wild longing gratified in the expression of it, joy ranging from sensuous pleasure to a hushed sense of holiness, an experience raised to a form of knowledge through nuanced play with accent, voice color, tone. I felt these qualities in Adrian from the moment I met her 30 years ago at YIVO. I immediately loved her. I found in her surplus, her reserves of power, her great warmth, a sister I'd lost in the chaos of our common history. The qualities that characterize her gifts as a singer, an artist and culture bearer are inseparable from the qualities that comprise her gift for intimacy. She sang as she loved. She loved as she sang, with all her heart, with all her soul, with all her might. It was good to be with her in the rich and vibrant quietude with which she surrounded herself and me when I visited her in hospital 3 weeks ago. She talked about the suffering she'd endured with an equilibrium that astounded me. She was spiritually intact, indomitable, took pleasure in conceiving of her next project, a CD of songs of gratitude. The tears she gave over to me were not for herself, but for Sarah. Adrian and I moved at the periphery of each other's lives for decades, yet each time we came into contact, I felt, as I know she did, that we were at the center of each other's lives. The occasions and projects we share were and are saturated with the nigunim, the melodies, in and through which we both experienced what we are here for. With her, the broken threads of the tradition that formed us could be mended. So the emblematic story I began to tell at the beginning, the story that got disrupted and forgotten about as it yielded to the greater urgency of describing, that is recognizing, that is celebrating Adrian's life, the story of a niggun that haunted me, can now be returned to. It was a diaspora song of mourning and homecoming, a setting of a poem by Yehuda Halevi. I remembered only the refrain. Between my childhood and my approaching 7th decade, I had lost the words of the verses and felt the phantom pain of generations of Jews leaving our place of sacred origins. And just here, betwixt and between worlds, Adrian was indispensable to me as she was for so many others. I called her with my fragment of song, and she sang for me what I needed to hear. Yamlied, translated from the Hebrew of Yehuda Halevi by Nachman Bialik. I am not a singer, but I want to directly transmit to you the world of the spirit that ceased being immaterial and lost when I was in Adrian's company, and we traveled a while together in story or song. Hauntedness was transformed into vital presence. I can convey this only by singing to you a piece of the tradition that Adrian restored to wholeness for me. First, a translation of the hybrid text in which the Hebrew of the medieval mystical poet enters and lives on in the Yiddish of the modern secular poet, in an act of reworking and continuing our cultural and spiritual Yerusha, our inheritance, that was at the heart of Adrian's contribution. Sea Song by Yehuda Halevi. I've forgotten all those I most love. I've left my own house. I've given myself over to the sea. Carry me, sea, to my mother's bosom. And you, faithful west wind, drive my ship to the other shore, to which my heart, with eagle's wings, has for so long sought away. Bring me there in peace. After that, I'll fly back to you. Greet all those I most love, and tell them of my good fortune. A word on context. In every song that Adrian sang, her knowledge of its location in the past was inflected by gesture, and the multitude of voices that she contained populated and moved through the song. The song moved from its site of origin to its current address, here and now among us. Each song derived its resonance by its double context, linking us to the unexpected ancestors Adrian summoned into the room. In the silence following each song, it began its latest second life, a part of tradition and a part of us. In the latest double context from which Yamlied receives a fresh infusion of eternal life, it mediates between the last day of Adrian's life and this commemoration of her life. She lay inert in the ICU between her family and friends gathered in the waiting room and Jene Welt, the other world. One or two at a time, we came to be with her. My whole relationship with Adrian prepared me for being with her then, as it does now. I began singing to her, and in this I was joined by the friend who was already in the room, kissing and caressing her. Together we sang a niggun that neither of us had ever heard until it spontaneously came out of us. Later, when I was alone with her, I sang her La mir alle singen a Zemerl, the Alte Rebbe's niggun, and Yamlied. As I was singing Yamlied, her right eye was closed and her left eye half opened. And with her left hand and my right resting in each other, she lightly squeezed my fingers once. It was enough to let me know she was with me, receiving into her soul a niggun in which she lives on in mine. Yamlied. Hab vergessen allerliebste, hab verlost mein eigen Haus. Hab der Jam sich abgegeben, trag mich Jam zum Mutterscheuß. Und du Mare Windgetreie, treib mein Schiff zum jenem Breg, was mein Herz mit adler Fliegel sucht schon lang zu ihm abreg. Bring mir noch hin bescholem, noch dem flieht dir zurück. Grüßen sollst du allerliebste und erzählt sei von mein Glück. Und du Mare Windgetreie, treib mein Schiff zum jenem Breg, was mein Herz mit adler Fliegel sucht schon lang zu ihm weg.
Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye.
Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things, feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth.
What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness.
How you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop. The passengers, eating maize and chicken, will stare out the window forever.
Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road.
You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive.
Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing.
You must wake up with sorrow.
You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth.
Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore.
Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread.
I first met Adrienne on Erev Nittel, Christmas Eve of 1987, and I last saw her on Chamisha Shel Chanukah, December 24th of the calendar year that just ended. Jeffrey Chandler has written in an obituary that Adrienne taught us to sing. I was one of her less successful experiments. I don't sing. I could already speak Yiddish at the time that I met her. What Adrienne and I really did was hang out as long and as often as possible. Very often at events like this, where if neither of us was called on to be up front for any particular reason, we'd be there at the back, rolling our eyes and making smart remarks to each other. The difference is everybody knew that I was doing it, and nobody would have believed that Adrienne was. We did things like that. We watched zombie movies on television with Sarah. We'd go to Yiddish-themed events and speak to each other in Hebrew, just so the Yiddishists couldn't understand us. And mostly, though, we spent most of our time laughing, sometimes with pleasure and as often as not in dismay at the growing amaratzis, the growing ignorance that has besieged the Jewish world. This isn't to say that I didn't learn from Adrienne, but I think I may have got something a bit different from what she gave to other people. In my case, it was to remind me that maybe, just maybe, there's a small chance that I don't really know it all. You can get an idea of what I mean from a song we're going to be singing it. It's one of Adrienne's signature pieces, and we'll be singing it later today, all of us together. Wenn ich wollte gehabt koyach, if I only had the strength. This was a song that for a century, possibly a bit more, was the sole possession of the same people who like to throw stones at cars that have the chutzpah to drive past them on a Saturday afternoon. The words mean, if I only had the strength, I'd run through the streets and yell Shabbos, the Sabbath, at the top of my voice. What did Adrienne do with this song? She saw that the word Shabbos, the Sabbath, that's supposed to connote peace and harmony and unity, had instead been turned into a slogan for hatred and for division. A song that all of us should be singing had been taken away from us. And Adrienne, who I think could put up with just about anything except lies and injustice, was determined to give it back to us and to get it back for us. And what she did, as far as I'm concerned, this is the essence of what Adrienne did for all of us. She only needed one Hebrew syllable to turn hatred into love and to take division back to unity. By changing Shabbos to Shulim, to peace, she didn't change the song, she repaired it. She gave it its tikkun, its tikkun, by bringing it back to what it was supposed to be. I grew up in the stone-throwing part of this world. I come from completely the other side of this cultural and religious divide. I grew up with this stuff, but it was Adrienne who taught me to like it. She had a talent for subversion, along with an innate sense of decorum that could let her reverse a tradition before any of its guardians had actually noticed. When a woman passes away, one of the things that you say in Hebrew is Tia nafsho tzchira b'tzchar achayim, which is usually rather lazily translated as may her soul be bound up in the bond of life. Those of you who know Hebrew, though, know that the word nephesh that's used here, which is often translated soul, really means vital spirit, or elan vital, what I guess in colloquial English we call energy. And it's her spirit and her energy that's going to keep Adrienne present for all of us, I think, as long as we're still here. There's a formula that's sometimes used on occasions like this from our, in other traditions. It's from the Odes of Horace, the great Latin poet, who says, non omnis moriar, I won't die completely, multaque pars mei vitabit libitinam, but the greater part of me is going to avoid the grave. If Rashi had written a commentary on Horace in addition to writing one on the Torah, he'd have told us that this phrase refers to the legacy of anybody who's changed the thoughts or behavior of large groups of other people. In Klezkamp, which Adrienne is responsible for in large measure, Klez Canada, Yiddish music camps and workshops in Europe and everywhere else in the world, they don't actually owe anything to Adrienne, because insofar as they're successful, insofar as they work, they are Adrienne. I keep thinking what's been occurring to me all week is the first time that Adrienne hired me to work at Circle Lodge, which is the camp for adults that she was responsible for as part of her job at the Workmen's Circle. And one of the other teachers who was there, many people here know him, Steve Weintraub, who couldn't be here today. Steve's well known in our circles for having a phobia about leaving his house without a martini kit. And up until this time, I'd never seen Adrienne drink more than an occasional glass of red wine or maybe a slow gin. But after a couple of hours in the bungalow where Steve and his partner Paul were mixing martinis, well, Adrienne was shit-faced. I mean, there's just no way around it. She leaves to go back to her cabin. 20 minutes or half an hour later, there she is back at Steve and Paul's. And she says, I'm lost. We already knew that, but... And she said to me, Mike, and I got to mention here that nobody in the Yiddish world ever calls me Mike. They only call me Wex. Older friends, though, people that I knew from other places or that I knew before I met all the people here, university, public school, even yeshiva and graduate school, they still call me Mike. Adrienne was the only person in this world who ever did that, and she did it from the first time we met, as if we'd known each other all our lives. She said to me, she said, Mike, take me home. I'm pissed. And that's what I did. And we're here now, I think, to see Adrienne home once more. In Hebrew again, they say, Chaval al dovdin v'lo mishtachkin. Alas, for those who are gone and can't be replaced. Adrienne will never really be gone. Because wie nur einer, es macht nicht aus, sei Jid, sei Go. Wie nur ein Benner, ein Bus dem Effen, auf ein Pisk. Und es fällt von dort nach Europa ein jüdisch Wort. Na pushete traf mama luschen a viele. Is nefesh. Der lebendige Mehus von Chanukah per noch voran. Adrienne can be anything, but she can't be as replaced.
The night Adrienne was nifter, many of us were at the hospital, and she brought us together, the frum and the fry in her death, as she did in her life. Our instinct was to guard her, watch over her as the hospital procedures and the reality of this new phase of life, death, hit us. I and others sat with the holy task of Shmirah, Vach. So what does this really mean, guarding? Why is this considered holy? I have been taught that this life is but a bridge, that our time in this world is a passage to the next one. Not everyone has been taught this, not everyone believes this. Death, tragic, untimely end to life as we know it. I've been taught that the guf, that the body, is a vessel for our neshama, our soul. And that when the body dies, as all life as we know it does die, the soul returns to the source of life. And Shmirah, guarding, is to sit vigil to comfort the soul. No harm should come to the vessel which once contained the soul. And Adrienne is a soul who was housed in such a beautiful woman with a presence and power that inspired thousands of souls, many amongst us now. If anything, doing Shmirah was a gift to me personally. Time to reflect, to meditate, to sit with my feelings. A gift I was given on Hanukkah, a gift? And how is the passing of a mother, a daughter, a partner, a sister, a friend, a leader, a teaching? How is the passing of a woman who possesses talent and ingenuity that surpasses so many and guides us all be a gift? So I read Tehillim, Lama Natseach al Naginat LeDavid, to the conductor, the Naginas by David. And David prays, Al Yemei Melech Tosif Shnotav Kamodor Vador. Days unto the days of the king may you add. May his years be like all generations. And I struggled to understand not just the Hebrew of the Psalms. I struggled to understand the poetry and prayers of David the psalmist, who writes to the conductor of the universe. Each psalm composed and sung with a different instrument, just as Adrienne lifted her voice with so many different accompanists and instruments. And just as David HaMelech prays that even if it was decreed that he die young at the hand of his enemies, and I read thinking, but Adrian did die young at the hand of this cancerous enemy. And so I kept reading. David prays that God should rescind the decree and add to his life the full 70 years of every generation. 70 years, I shout inwardly and cry, not fair. Unfair for Adrian to not be given even that which this is written for to be for every generation. Yet I continue to read and struggle with the text, with these concepts that I don't fully grasp. And then I read a commentary on the text. Rabbi Hirsch sees in David's words a prayer of greater scope. That what David prays for is that days be added beyond the years of mortality. That the example he set by his personal life in connection with his closeness to God remain a beacon of light through all generations. Como dor vador. That his earthly deeds endure long after his soul has left its mortal shell. And it dawns on me, as dawn is approaching in the wee hours of the morning, the meaning behind these words, the reason I am reciting these ancient words are that they have relevance to me personally, and to all of us, I humbly believe. And it is that beyond the limited years of Adrian's too brief mortal life, may her earthly good deeds endure long after her soul has left its earthly shell. Al yemei melech tosif shnotav kamo dor vador. May we all carry on the light that Adrian has given us. May we all pass this light on. May the holy work of the Klezmorim continue to lift our spirits higher and higher. May the light of the Shekhinah, the light which Adrian cast on us all, spread peace and understanding and build bridges in our fractured world. Just as Adrian personally helped so many of us stay connected and make this world a schönere und bessere Welt.
Why abstain from love when, like the beautiful snow goose, someday your soul will leave this summer camp? Why abstain from happiness when, like a skilled lion, your heart is nearing and will someday see the divine prey is always near? This is a poem from a book of Hafiz, the 14th century Persian poet that Adrian was having read to her in the hospital by some who were with her. This was her copy, and Marilyn has certain poems that were dog-eared by Adrian. She wanted some of them composed. So I wanted to read this one that I found that she had dog-eared. It's called Someone Untied Your Camel. I cannot sit still with my countrymen in chains. I cannot act mute, hearing the world's loneliness crying near the beloved's heart. My love for God is such that I could dance with him tonight without you, but I would rather have you there. Is your caravan lost? It is if you no longer weep from gratitude or happiness, or weep from being cut deep with the awareness of the extraordinary beauty that emanates from the most simple act and common object. My dear, is your caravan lost? It is if you can no longer be kind to yourself and loving to those who must live with the sometimes difficult task of loving you. At least come to know that someone untied your camel last night. For I hear its gentle voice calling for God in the desert. At least come to know that Hafiz will always hold a lantern with galaxies blooming inside, and that I will always guide your soul to the divine warmth and exhilaration of our beloved's tent.
when Adrian and I were students in Chicago, there were a handful of artists that we loved to go to their recitals because they'd bring themselves right up to the point of crying. What a brave decision, she'd say. What a problematic decision. Yeah. And when we used to sing concerts together, she'd go before me, we'd take turns, and if she did something really well, she'd bring me to tears, and I'd have to go on, and she'd see the tears in my eyes, and she'd go, oh, Johnny, but I knew what she was thinking was, oh, right, I did it. So I think she'd be having a good time here today. But I'm not here to talk about Adrian's great heart, which was in everything she did. I'm also not here to talk about her intelligence, which was more than considerable. She showed flashes of insight that would make the rest of us, often who are accounted relatively bright in our own right, she would make us feel like drooling infants, besides her brilliant and delicate insights. I'm here to talk about a certain period in Adie's life. When I first met Adie, she was doing the classical music thing in Chicago. She worked with voice teachers and coaches. She sang in ensembles and choirs, opera and chamber music, often in groups of Jewish interest. And she always displayed this innate musicality and such a lovely voice. I remember that she was particularly gifted in singing the leader of Hugo Wolf, an obscure composer who set dense and intensely personal poetry. She had, even then, a precocious ability to interpret the text. The words in vocal music were everything for her. When we met, she had just passed the master's exam at the University of Chicago en route to a PhD in American intellectual history. Not bad, nicht schlecht. I think her training in intellectual history developed her uncanny ability to interpret and relate works of art of all kinds, to synthesize and combine them and find new meaning. Adie came to New York to study Yiddish, to put the formal finishing seal on her knowledge of the language and to delve deeply into the poetry. She was going to write her dissertation on the Yiddish poetess Anna Margolin and her circle to show how intellectual immigrant communities function in American society. But she was less interested in the history of the United States. The works of art fired her imagination. That's what moved her. That's what animated her heart. I remember being with her in Israel in a place called Malone Rosenblatt. They had a great breakfast. And when we sat at the table, she had this look of intense concentration on her face. She was jumping out of her skin, and she was completely delighted. She said later, the elderly couple nearby was conversing in German Yiddish, the rarest of the rare. She was so full of excitement at seeing that living moment. She was becoming a Yiddishist. In New York, she studied with the remaining Yiddish intellectuals of the previous generation, who gathered especially around YIVO. They fell in love with this ebullient and beautiful young woman who understood the subtleties of language and understood their literary life. This woman soaked up the precise grammar and pronunciation. She perceived their depth. She understood the nuance of what they wrote and what they thought. And she had an expressive, trained voice to boot. She sat across the table from them while they blew smoke in her face, and she did not mind. She was soaking up a treasure given generously to a brilliant and eager student. She was a gift to them, and they knew it. The poet Wolf Unen found in her a poetic muse to whom he offered poetry of love. When she interviewed Isaac Bashevis Singer for Moment magazine, he proposed marriage to her. When the great Ruth Rubin died, Adie was reluctant to sing at the memorial because she didn't know Ruth personally. But Pete Seeger sent her a compelling personal note asking for her to attend, and Adrienne did. I guess Pete knew that she was becoming the best Yiddish singer of her generation. Adrienne met other young enthusiasts with appreciation for the jeopardized legacy of Yiddish art and folk music and culture. Many of them are in this room right now. And she made a fateful decision. She decided not to write history, but to make history instead. Adrienne spent her life invigorating the legacy of Yiddish, inspiring and networking a whole generation of Yiddishists and artists. She became the joyous and kind magnet at the heart of a movement that now continues in academic programs, festivals, in adherents too numerous to describe right now. Adie's choice came from her love for our people and her love for its finest treasures. She transmitted her deep understanding to thousands upon thousands, ensuring a Yerusha for posterity. Just listen to her last CD to witness her love and her genius in full flower. Now, she chose a life that was not easy. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't a smart choice. It was a brilliant choice. It was a courageous commitment that came from the depth of her soul. She lived ecstatically with enormous integrity, and she made a unique place for herself in history as the mentor and primary exponent of Yiddish poetry and song in her transitional generation. Hers is a truly wonderful story, the kind of life people will remember and will honor. I, for one, won't be surprised when someone writes a history about her, her comrades, her circle, and what they accomplished in love and in joy.
Well, first I have to thank Zalman Motek for me meeting Adrienne because he couldn't do the gig, and I was the sub. So I was colleague with Adrienne, and we played concerts together, and we taught together, and it was in Weimar. We were friends, walking down the street when she said to me, I have to make a confession. I eat unwashed fruit. And I said, I heard myself say, I love you. It was before we got together. And this look of shyness sort of flashed across her face. And there was something in that just was the beginning of me being in deep trouble. Because there was a sense of that she loved, but was shyer about being loved. That she gave so much, that she was shy, and that was. And then when we were in Kiev, and we were all sick with the flu, further hanging out with her, I started realizing, okay, I'm in deep trouble. Now I'm in really deep trouble here. And I said to her, I think I want to kiss you. And she said, that can be arranged. And thus began an 8.5-year long distance relationship, because I lived in Canada and she lived in New York. She's 57 and I 47. I had just finished telling my shrink, I don't think I'm relationship material. But there was something about our connection that made us agree that we were going to try to make this work. And there were so many times coming and being with her and then having to say goodbye. I learned to read the tiniest nuances on the phone, and she to me, and somehow we made this relationship, this beautiful relationship. My mother liked her. She's the only partner I ever had that my mother liked. Performing with Adrienne was like being the co-pilot in a twin-engine Cessna over the Grand Canyon. And if you want to know what it's like to be held by her, just listen to her sing. There is no difference. Whenever we had trouble, whenever we were so compatible, we could exist in a tiny hotel room and the tiniest of spaces in this kind of just comrades compatible and so different. And whenever we had difficulties, as in an intimate relationship always brings out the best and it brings out the worst. You show each other your shame, you show each other your strength. And the romance and the great times and how we love to eat and go to films and go to concerts and laugh our heads off. We also had to work through difficulty of the distance, and somehow our communication she was always loving, and we worked through things, and that's something that I know now, that I am satisfied with how I've been loved. I mean, I will never be loved like that again. And I'm satisfied. In the time that I was with her during her illness, there was one point at which she turned to me and said, you know, I should be curling up into a little ball, but I find myself pushing myself forward. And when so sick all year, the way she would get herself together and make it go and do the gig, it was so unbelievable. Her strength. I was thinking last night, I'm glad the Shiva started on New Year's Eve, because for the rest of my life, I'll remember New Year's Eve will never be the same. I accept that loss. Thank you for taking me into this community, because I'm a bit introverted. I can have my head up and she brought me to you, and I beg you to keep me with you. She made me open. And I love you all, and I love you, Sarah. And I love you, baby.
I'm up, right?
Whatever. So I wrote this really nice thing that I read in California about Mom being like a center of a universe, and we're all these like whirling planets and stars, and it was really lovely. And then I tried to write last night, and I tried. I tried to write this morning, and I couldn't.
There's too much. There's too much to say about her. I mean, shit, we're here, it's like 3 hours later, like halfway through, I don't know, there's just too much to say. There are too many stories. And she was my mom. She was so much to so many people, but she was always my mom. And then, Dan and I were talking, he's like, oh, does it feel weird that, she's like written over and over again as the mother of the Yiddish revival? It's like, no, Cooper, please, like she had so much to give, it never took away. Like we were one. So here's my stretch, and it's probably trying to make some kind of, not despairing impact, whatever. It kind of nauseates me to do it, but but this is, I was collecting little memories, things, intimate moments of me and Mom. When I was little and we lived in Westville, she used to wrap me in a blanket and we would sit on the porch at night and she would read to me or tell me stories. And she wrapped me in the blanket because I always got bitten by mosquitoes. I broke that. Sorry. And, I was thinking of things like that. She would always go on vacation with me to these places that have water because I loved water, but people who know Mom really well know that she has a terrible, terrible stomach and motion sickness is her #1 thing. So we'd be on these snorkeling trips and Mom would be hanging onto a rope at the side of a boat, puking into the water. Over and over again. She's like, no, Sarah, this time it's fine. I got a new medication. It's fine. And then absolutely not. But that's Mom, She's like, well, maybe this time it'll she would call it feeding the fish. It's really incredibly mortifying. But in the hospital, she reminded me of when I was little, she went on a trip to England, and I stayed with Tommy. And I think she was gone for a week. And Tommy and I slept in the bed together, and she had arranged little paper bags with each day of the week that she'd be gone written on them. Sorry, and inside, each one was a clean pair of underwear and a little note and a little toy. So that even though she was away, she was still taking care of me. Okay. So, that's it.
So I'd like to make a couple of more logistical announcements. First of all, there are a number of folks who've come up using the wheelchair lift, and that does take a little time. So when we've concluded in a few more minutes, those of you, if you can, we invite you to exit via the West End Avenue doors to ease the traffic at the 100th Street door. However, there are two other things that you need to know. First of all, there is a memorial book at the 100th Street exit over here. And if you haven't signed it, the family would very much appreciate if you would sign it so that they can know who was here. Also, because of the length, just the aggregate length and the number of people who wanted to say something, we made the decision not to have an open mic at this point because we knew that everybody here would want to say something. And we'd be here until next New Year's Day. So in the chapel downstairs here in the 100th Street lobby, there'll be a camera set up. And if you would like to, take a moment and record a memory on video in the chapel, you can do that as well. The family would also like to recommend that if you'd like to give tzedakah in Adrian's memory, you heard about her many, many commitments and her recognition from JFREJ last year, or already now 2 years ago, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. They invite you to give tzedakah to Jews for Racial and Economic Justice. We're going to conclude with the more liturgical portion of things. Jonathan's going to say the Male, and then we're going to say Kaddish. I'm going to assume that most everybody knows the words to Kaddish, and if not, we do have some prayer books over there. But what I'd like to just say one word about Kaddish before we do it. You'll often hear people tell you that Kaddish is a proclamation of the wonders of God's sanctity and glory despite our pain at death. I would just like to let everybody know that this is not an accurate description of the Kaddish. The Kaddish is stated in a subjunctive voice. It is not that God is great, magnified, and sanctified in the world that God created. The meaning, the strict translation of the Kaddish is, may God become magnified and sanctified in the world the way it ought to be. And the recognition is that when you say Kaddish, for other reasons as well, but especially when you say it in a mourning context, it focuses your attention on the way in which the world is diminished, in which the way the world is smaller than it was before, in which there are also many empty spaces in the world. So in 2 more minutes, Jonathan will say El Maleh Rachamim, we'll all say Kaddish together, and then we'll play a CD of Adrian singing. Try to hear the echoes of the empty spaces in the world that Adrian's left us.
El Maleh Rachamim Shochem Bamromim Amtzeh Menucha Nechano Tachat Kanfei Ashchina B'malot Kedoshim Utarim K'zar Arakia Mashirim Et Nishmat Chana Freda Bat Menachem Mendel V'Bela Buni Shalcha Le'olama B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchato Ona Bala Rachamim Hasirei Beseter Kenafecha Le'olamim Utzeror B'tzoror HaChaim Et Nishmato Adonai hu nachalata, Tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar amen, amen.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei Rabbah, v'yalma divra kerutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chai echon yom echon, chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, v'agala u'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach, v'olam lol me'omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yithalal shmei dekudsha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechemata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'romav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Es ist Herbst und was gegrünt verkehrt verjanet. Es ist Herbst und was geblüht vergeht. Und ich, was hab gemeint, ist ständig Frühling. Und halte Hand die ganze Ewigkeit. Wenn's liegt dicht in der Nacht mein Weg. Krankenvögel sagen treurig, seid gesund ihr. Kerst in Fenster und sie klagt der Wind. Oh, wie wollt ich jetzt da weg von dannen? Zijn bereik van nacht der Frühling kriegt. Liederregen, a Galopp auf wilden Pferden. Räumt mir eine Sorge, hat mir Hort. Du weißt, darfst du warten auf den Frühling. Als so der Röschen volle Keuschens Oh
I am Adrienne Greenbaum, otherwise known as Adrienne with the A. I was often confused, delightfully so, with Adrienne with an E, much more than that. As recently as last summer at Class Canada, I had flocks of people coming to my class. I was so delighted. And then when they opened, these few college kids said, we're here to really study the depth of the poetry in our song. I said, oh, I have a feeling I'm the wrong Adrienne for you. And all got worked out. My unique memories, perhaps, of Adrienne, although the more I listen, the more I realize it's not so unique, were all based on trust. I first met Adrienne as a classical flutist, and I was hired to perform at Michigan Israel, where Jonathan was cantor. And Sarah, you were about 3 or 4. You were prancing up and down the aisles. And on this particular evening, I learned a lot about trust. I didn't know Adrienne very well yet. But during the evening service, when we were performing, she politely excused herself. She said, I'll be back. And she went behind the pulpit and took a towel and puked in the towel. She came back. I said, are you okay? She said, no problem. Where were we? And we did another song, and she said, I'm sorry, I'll be right back. And she did it again. Just a little 7-Up, she said, I'll be fine. If I were ever sick in other performances, I realized, well, if Adrienne Cooper could do it, this Adrienne can do it too. I just would perform, go off stage, do my business, come back on. So you trust your body, your mind, that you can get through things. Another moment of trust was...
Was she pregnant?
No.
Oh.
No, she just had a virus. Right. Another moment of trust was when I was performing with her, preparing to go to Amsterdam. I was so thrilled that she invited me. She handed me the music. Do you want me to speed up? It's going to be
no,
fast.
No, it's not that. It's that we promised everyone that they could come in and listen. Oh. Because we didn't really want it to be like a bottleneck. So...
I can do another one, by the way.
Somebody to...
No.
Okay. I was waiting for you to say that she had morning sickness.
No, because Sarah was born. And
Sarah was born, okay.
And then I believe that's her only child.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So, no, she had a virus. The next moment of trust was when she handed me the book. Actually, she sent me the music ahead of time. And, of course, I looked it over, practiced it, decided a little bit of what I was going to do. It's the kind of thing where you get together and you decide on the spot. Well, very first thing she says is, we're not doing it in this key. We're doing it in D flat major. I said, oh. And I decided, if you trust me, I better just keep my nerves to myself. And she said, she saw that I was, going to have to play something else other than what I looked at. She said, I know you're going to be fine. Oh, okay. And I took that trust all the way to Amsterdam and learned that if someone can trust you, that it brings out the best. And then finally, Sarah, I don't know, this is to you. I was really sick in my room at Class Canada, and your mom was going through a song with you, and you were struggling, and she was trying to help you, and you went through all the mother-daughter stuff, but only with the deepest respect, but still, I had gone through it myself a lot with Rebecca, who you met at class camp. You're a little older, but it reminded me so much of what my daughter and I went through, but realizing that I don't think I even trusted my daughter as much as your mom did you, and it only made you go out there and kick butt. And that is what your mom was all about is helping others kick butt, as she did.
So tell me your name.
Aliyah Cheskis Kotel. And Adrienne and I became friends when I was 19 and she was 21. We were in Jerusalem together, and we were in an ensemble of 4. She was the second soprano, I was the second alto. And we performed in a production of Aryeh Zak's very bawdy interpretation of Kol Adam, the medieval morality play Everyman, translated into Hebrew, with Adrienne and Aliyah and 2 other singers singing Orlando de Lasso 16th century music and Dies Irae from the Catholic Mass in Israel. Not something you would predict. We became instant friends. It was so exciting to find that her mom and her brothers and she were all a Jerusalem family. Her mom did yoga. Nobody did yoga at the time. And we shared a lot of our American past with our Jerusalem newness. Adrienne and I were English majors together. We did our degrees in the English Literature Department of Hebrew University. We shared many different things, but we became instant friends. The 2 adjectives that I've used for Adrienne in the past few weeks since I've been visiting her in the hospital and finding out about the last week are dramatic and spicy. Adrienne was always spicy. It wasn't cayenne pepper, it was cinnamon. And that's what she was to all her friends. That's what will stay with us, dramatic and spicy. When she was at the University of Chicago, she inspired my husband and me to take an EST guest seminar. And we went to the EST guest seminar and thought it was just completely bizarre, not what we wanted to be into. And we called her from Washington, D.C. to Chicago and said, Adrienne, what is this? And she said, just wait, you'll see, it'll have an impact on your life. She always wanted us to know that things would have impact on our lives.
Did it?
Absolutely not. No, complete rejection. But we always kept the dialogue going. There was no question about it. And then we met when our girls were 4 years old, and we raised our girls together. My daughter, Orly, lives in San Francisco and was with Sarah at the funeral. A few days ago, she canceled her vacation to be able to do that. And we raised our little 4-year-olds together with the same gusto and the same verve and the same vivaciousness and the same outspoken quality. 13 years old, graduation from Heschel. The opening song at Heschel was Orly and Sarah in 2 voices, just like Adrienne and Aliyah had been in 2 voices years before that.
What did they sing?
I'll have to find out the name. I think they might have sang Es Brennt, but they sang, the 2 of them, a cappella, no accompaniment, just Orly and Sarah singing in 2 voices. And last year, Orly was in town from San Francisco, and we went to the Leonard Cohen concert, and there were Adrienne and Sarah at the Leonard Cohen concert, always appreciating anyone who could make great music and have great lyrics with great music. And I turned to her because I've been a champion of Benji since he's a little boy. His mother is my best friend in Los Angeles. And I turned to Adrienne and I said, I need to ask you something. Since Benji just learned Yiddish from scratch, I need to know, what's the quality of his Yiddish? And she turned to me, and you could just hear her saying this, and she said, perfection. That's my word for Adrienne, perfection.
My name is Martin Horowitz, and I worked in Russia and Ukraine and the former Soviet Union for 17 years. And one of the major projects that we supported there was a Klezfest, which was based on the Klezkamp model. And I'm really here to speak for the 3 generations of musicians and singers in Russia, in Ukraine, in Belarus, and Moldova, that Adrian, together with Zalman Mlotek, taught and encouraged and supported in bringing klezmer and folk music to their own communities and to enable them to join the larger world of that music. Adrian was not only a teacher and a mentor, but an example for all of these young Jewish musicians who realized that there was a chance through this music to combine their professional abilities with service to their communities and be a part of a larger world. Many of them have gone on to make CDs, to travel to the United States, and her death is a loss to many, many people, but I thought it was important to mention the people over there. I have communicated it, and they have asked me to just to say a word for them. I hope that during the year there will be probably some kind of musical memorial for Adrian, either in Kiev or in St. Petersburg or somewhere. And they all miss her as well as I.
My name is Leonard Lehrman, and I want to talk about Adrian and what she meant to me and my wife. We've done a lot of Yiddish concerts. We did the first Yiddish song recital in Bayreuth at the invitation of Wolfgang Wagner during the Wagner Festival. I grew up at the Sholem Aleichem Volksschule before I went to Hebrew school. I was, I think, the last conductor of the Workmen's Circle Chorus. I was invited to do that in 2004, and Adrian was working there. And we had some problems because the chorus was basically dying out, and we were trying to save it. And then there were a few people who were trying to destroy it, including an administrator that I won't name. But Adrian kind of came to the rescue, at least as much as she could. I had a long file correspondence with her on it, and many phone calls. And she did save the most important thing that we were doing at that time, which was a centennial project for the 100th birthday of Mark Blitzstein. We did a concert with many of his pieces, including the musical I've Got the Tune, which is all about the social importance of music, and the Workmen's Circle people were very, very much behind that. We also had the Solidarity Singers and the Metropolitan Philharmonic Chorus that I had organized back in 1988 for the Rosenberg Cantata and I Have a Dream. And we managed to salvage that. We had performances at Queens College and Great Neck and at the Workmen's Circle building that is no more, I guess, or it's been sold. It was the People's Voice Cafe. And as I said, that was almost destroyed, but Adrian helped us make it happen, and I will be eternally grateful to her for that. I didn't know her that well. I did work with Joanne Bortz, did a concert just a few weeks ago with her, and Joan was very close to Adrian. They did quite a few things together, 3 Yiddish divas and so forth, and I urged Joanne to come and record for you. I hope maybe she will.
My name is Randy Mia Berman. I've actually never met Adrian Cooper, but I've heard so much about her. I grew up in a family of musicians and very non-religious, but very emphasized on Jewish culture. Workmen's Circle, my grandmother and mother belonged to, and both my mother and grandmother played mandolin, and they were very involved with Jewish music, books, culture, and music has gotten me through both of my parents' deaths, and it's because of music that I feel there's such passion in this world, and I've heard her sing, I've heard her exuberance, and I wanted to just pay my tribute to to her because I grew up in a very musical, activist, workman's circle family, and because of her extensive work in social activism, music, Jewish culture, spreading the word and the music. And actually, I was up at Circle Lodge several times, and through my own music, I play recorder, through recorder circles and through music circles and folk dance circles, and I've heard of her. It's almost like, you know, I have a radio show, and I interview lots of musicians, and she was one of the people I wanted to try to interview as well. And so it's just sort of worlds that collide, and really the whole spirituality of her music is what really brought me to her. And my mother was also Chana, so I think the only Yiddish that I really know is one sentence. When I started to learn Yiddish, I don't know it, but I like to listen to it. We're all very linguistic in my family, and at one point I started to learn it, and the only sentence I know is Lehrer lernt in die Lehre. But you know, everything I hear, it makes me, especially her spirit, makes me want to learn it because I want to understand the lyrics, because the music is so gorgeous. So I really just wanted to express my condolences, my feelings of exuberance of her music going and living on. Really, that was why I was here.
It's very, very beautiful, beautiful ceremony, memorial today. It said so much and brought back so many memories. You know, my professional life is intertwined with Adrian for the last decades, and it was always personal, it was always close, it was always loving, and went beyond the professional. I posted something on Facebook this morning about Debbie Friedman passed away at the beginning of this year. He was also an artist that I worked with for many years. And at one of the sing-alongs that we organized about 4 or 5 years ago, Debbie didn't know what to sing. And I suggested that we translate her Misha Berach into Yiddish. And Adrian was there, and Adrian did the translation. And then they sang it together. And the Misha Berach is a very powerful, beautiful poem of healing, a song of healing that was ubiquitous in Debbie's world. And Adrian embraced it like completely. She was very connected to that world as well as she was connected to so many worlds. And a year later, we did the sing-along, and Debbie was sick. She was homesick. And I asked Adrian if she would sing the Misha Berach, the Yiddish Misha Berach. And I had Debbie on the phone to hear it from her home. And of course, Adrian sang it, moved everybody in the audience to tears, and Debbie fell apart and wept on the phone from the emotion and the connection. And then so that was a very poignant, you know, connection that Misha Berach. Adrian, Misha Berach I don't remember. She did it in Ashkenazi. She did it very powerfully. And then in the hospital, we talked about doing a concert with Adrian, a healing concert, a benefit, something, several weeks before she passed. And we talked about repertoire, and I reminded her about the Misha Berach, and she said, oh, that's a wonderful idea. And it really was something that I had wished that Misha Berach could have healed her from that moment. And, you know, she never, in the time that she was ill, was always looking at the path to being healed, the path to getting better, you know, and very inspirational. And we'll miss her terribly. It's a big gap in all of our lives. But I have to say that even before we heard her voice today, at the end and on the CD, her voice was there. You know, it was just singing over us, and you know, and that's what will stay with us. Her voice and what she represented. And I'm sending all my love to Sarah and to Marilyn, and you know. I wish Adrian was here, but you know, I send you my friendship and want to be in your lives. I want you to be in my life. So that's my message to you.
Hi, I'm sending my love to Sarah and Marilyn. And my name is Annette Hartchick Rosenfeld, and I first met Adrian at the YIVO when I was working at the YIVO. She had just come, and she was one of the Naigekumene, an American-born person, whereas I was a child of survivors and a native Yiddish speaker. A Naigekumene? Oh, a Naigekumene. Yeah, newcomer to Yiddish. But she had such a love of the Yiddish culture and language and embraced it so completely. And as we see now, she not only came to own it, but transmitted it to so many people with her love and her energy and her talent, and brought it all worldwide, not just in a local area like New York. And I've known Adrian on and off in a peripheral way for the last 30 years. I taught at the Folkschule. She was technically my boss at a certain time. There would be times I hear her speak. I was always struck by her intelligence, her brilliant wit, her fantastic musical abilities. And I'm very moved by the fact that she could have been a world-class opera singer, but really a first-rate world performer, and chose to pass on the music of Yiddish culture and of Yiddish life and give it to new people, young people, and to all of us. Andere Naigekumene. And Yiddish culture will sustain itself through her gifts and her the things that she was able to forge ahead and create with the Klez Camp and the people she's trained and people who remember her, and being able to go on worldwide trips to Russia and Poland and all the wonderful, wonderful things that she did. She was a real force of life, and she'll be very, very missed.
So my name is Rhoda Neshama Waller, and I just have a personal story. It's personal to me. There's a Hasidic story that not a leaf falls without a purpose and a meaning, and that through all its peregrinations in the wind, it lands just where it's supposed to land. So for me, I met Adrian in 1984 or 1985, whenever it was that I went to study at the Earl Weinreich Center at Columbia to study Yiddish. And my grandparents came from Poland, and of course they spoke Yiddish, but nobody spoke Yiddish to me except, Sei gesund. Yiddish was the language my parents would speak over my head when I wasn't supposed to understand. So I was in a doctoral program at the Graduate Center in Comparative Literature, and at some point I was supposed to learn German along with other languages, and I didn't want to learn German until I had learned Yiddish. So I signed up at Columbia to learn Yiddish. And as part of that program, Adrian taught us to sing Yiddish songs. I had never heard these Yiddish songs before. So I learned to sing Yiddish songs, and I did sing with the Yiddish chorus later for a while. And so her influence in so many ways, and the beauty of that music that's in my heart. And I feel very blessed to have known her in just that time period. And I hear this from everybody all today.
Anything you want to say?
The service was very beautiful, and I do believe that there is a bridge from here to the world to come, and that her neshama is there.
I'm Moshe Bear, and I remember when I was studying with Masha Benya, who was, I guess, in her generation, the doyenne of Yiddish art and folk singers. As I was beginning my studies with Masha at the Abraham Goodman House, and started to listen critically to singers of Yiddish, I asked Masha, who is out there who is singing wonderfully? And she said, one of the most exquisite singers of your generation, my generation, is Adrienne Cooper. Adrienne, of course, as was characterized, was not primarily a preservationist, but she was deeply steeped in the art inherent in the Yiddish poetry and Yiddish song. And Masha, who was a preservationist, thought very, very highly of her exquisite singing. I remember performing with her periodically. We would do the Workman's Circle, summer gigs at Eisenhower Park. And I remember the first couple of times I went to Gles Camp, and she was leading master classes there. And her insights were always right on target. And yet, if someone brought a different insight or something, a chiddush, something new to a song, her eyes would light up, and she would say, I remember when I sang for her Sterndl, Sterndl, and gave a different background that I'd gotten from Masha for that song. And Adrienne lit up and said, I never thought of it that way. And you could see that I'd given her something. What is that song? You want to give me a little piece of that? Sterndl, Sterndl, glorious stuff. I don't remember all the words. It's been so many years since I've sung that song. But I thought eventually I'm going to get back to Klezkamp, and especially after Masha passed away, I'd like to go and take some fresh material to Adrienne, because I trusted her. Sometimes we have to not just wait, we have to, time is too short for us all. It was certainly too short for her. And yet what she brought, what she left, extraordinary stuff. In the Cantors Assembly, when news of her passing reached the membership, comments like, a giant talent, but an even larger neshama, is what peppered the comments. It's a great loss, but through the tears, it's also a great gain. I will miss her. I will miss her. But I can keep listening, and I shall. Her Dreaming in Yiddish CD is so wonderful. So wonderful. And there's a song, an Altalnigen, that I've always wanted to work on and to learn. And she's a wonderful model. Time is to go and learn it and to do it.
I'm Don. The context was actually pretty slim, which is that basically through Epicenter from Klezkamp and stuff like that. And so I was sort of thinking this whole week about how it is, and I've been saying to people how slim the connection was, and it's really not. Because what I saw in just a few moments of being with her and all that was how sweet and wonderful she is. When people would come over and talk to her around the Epicenter, she would spend time, especially students and stuff like that. Like I say, my context's kind of slim. I play drums, that's really not her instrument. I don't speak much Yiddish and didn't really sing much Yiddish and all that. But there's just a sweetness that really comes through, and I just hope that we end up being able to separate her legacy from her humanness. That's all. And blessings to you, Sarah and Marilyn, all those.
I'm Marcia Kahn. One of the proudest labels I get to wear is being Daniel's mom. I'm going to be talking to you, Sarah. Everybody's talking about your mom, and there just aren't enough words to talk about how wonderful she was. There's a little part I want to talk to, honey. Your mother mothered everybody. She mothered people who were older than she. She mothered people who were younger than she. She just gave off this nurturing, this wonderful, safe, warm place. And when you spoke today about your oneness, your relationship with your mom, honey, of all the people that she mothered, you are the only one who can say she was your mother. And how lucky you are to have had her for your mother, to have been her daughter. And I know how lucky she felt to have you. And that's the oneness of what you spoke. And all the love that she received, honey, is extended to you too. You're not alone. I love you, sweetheart.
I don't know if I should speak to Sarah Yeah, I talk to Sarah a lot.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to see you and Adrian work together before learning from each other and doing that kind of stuff. But
We didn't do much publicly. I mean, we played together in Russia a few times as part of Yiddish Fest group. She graciously recorded on 2 songs that I wrote on my record. And, you know, we've done little things here and there in the scene. I knew Adrian mostly as a teacher and as a mother and a friend of mine. You know, I wouldn't do half the things I spend my life doing were it not for her. I mean, she, not only directly because of things that she taught me personally, but because of her example, because she was one of the very few people of her generation, and I consider her also to be part of my generation as much as many others. I consider her a comrade as much as a teacher or a mother. Her example was a liberating one because it allowed, she always insisted that people simply use this culture as a living thing to express themselves, that it's only a tool, that there's nothing that, you don't have to serve, you know, who said it today? Sam talked about it, that, you know, it has to be a struggle, it has to be of you. I don't want to talk on that level. I'm very familiar with what a good teacher is because of you. My mother is a great teacher. And when I met Adrian and watched her teach, I saw in her your teaching,
Really?
your ability to teach. She was an excellent teacher. When I saw what she meant to a whole generation of post-Soviet women, when I watched her and Marilyn do master classes in Moscow, several years. I watched her, and she did it with me too, because I would, you know, do a song and she would teach me. But I saw her take women who were unformed as performers, unformed as artists, and she would find what little bit of themselves there was in their performance. Around a language that they didn't understand, a culture that they didn't have a close relationship to, and she would find that little kernel of themselves like a tiny flame, and she would let that grow, and she would bring it out so that the song was an expression of that. And she would use that flame of the performer to illuminate the content of the song, the meaning of it, the message of it, the story of it. I learned from her the importance of poetry, of illuminating a lyric, of expressing something with a song. And the first time I heard her sing was at Klez Canada. And I had never heard her version of Wollt ich gehad koyach. And it must have been 2004 or 2005 at the height of the Iraq War. And I remember Winograd played piano and Adrian sang, and then there was a whole group of women who sang with her. And I remember thinking that men need to relinquish all power. That the problems of the world are expressly the great lack of women like Adrian being in positions of state power. that Adrian was channeling the basic need, the maternal need in all of us, men and women, to militantly demand peace, to fight for peace. With laughter as much as tears or blood, you know. She was wickedly funny, and she didn't take a lot seriously, besides the things that she needed to take seriously. And so I knew her, I was able to recognize that she was a great teacher, and she was a great teacher of mine. And I was able to experience her as a good friend and a good colleague, and someone who was critical but heartening in her solidarity, you know? That when I felt alienated because of my politics, because of my sometimes dissentious attitudes, I always found a critical comrade in Adrienne. And I found a critical and loving and constructive tutor in her, in my lyrics, in my writing, because she's such an amazing writer. Her translations are so good, and she was one of the first people to encourage me in my translation, in my writing. And I could take songs to her and translations to her, and she was someone that I always trusted to edit my songs. And she would say, Dan, that's bullshit. You don't need that line. You really want to say that? Get rid of it.
So what's a line that she told you to get rid of that you now don't have?
Well, it's a political line in my song about Abba Kovner.
Yeah.
I had this line. It's a song about partisans who take vengeance on Nazis, on Germans, not specifically Nazis, on random Germans after the war. It's a true story.
Is this true?
Yeah.
Abba Kovner did that?
Yeah. For about 2 years. He was the head of a group called Nakama, or Nakama. And he and about 40 others hatched a plot to poison water supplies in German cities and kill 6 million Germans.
They didn't succeed.
No.
This was like the eye for an eye?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it didn't, I mean, it's an amazing story. Anyway, I wrote this song about it.
I think everyone needs to know where you live in order for this to have deep meaning.
I live in Berlin. I've lived in Berlin for 7 years. And it was, you know, Adrienne, having worked in Berlin, Ellen Byrne, you know, and like these pathways that were forged by Adrienne and some of her colleagues, that made it even possible for me to live in Berlin and do what I do. And she has myriad disciples in Germany, singers of Yiddish, Jewish and non-Jewish. She taught there.
Who are living to this day because Abba Kovner's plan was thwarted.
Who were living to this day because Abba Kovner's plan was thwarted. And I had a line in there. I shared it with her in Moscow.
So the line was?
They put their vengeance on the shelf to take it out later on someone else. And she was like, Dan, you're smarter than that. Like, you know you have my solidarity when it comes to the Palestinians, but this isn't a song about that. And it's a song about something else, and you have to be very clear if you're going to make statements like that or if you're going to ask questions with your song, if you're going to ask challenging questions with your song.
So what do you have instead?
Can vengeance put upon the shelf be taken out later on someone else?
You turned it into a question?
But be careful how you read this tale, lest your own prejudice prevail. For look around the world today and consider the role that vengeance plays. For history has its unpaid debts, and is it better if we forget? Anyway, look, it's a controversial song. I don't sing it that much anymore. But the point is, she turned it from an offensive song into a controversial one. She turned it into something. Well, she understood audiences. She understood theater and drama. I studied theater, and she had an innate sense of drama and also an educated sense of drama. She understood what it meant. She understood what it meant to be pedagogical in performance. She understood what it meant to be challenging, to be provocative, to be thought-provoking, and to be touching. Her performance was full of sentiment, but she was never sentimental. It was full of memory, but she was never nostalgic. It was full of joy and fun, but it was never schmaltz. And that's why I know she was a good teacher. And you already heard about her as a mother. And
Yeah.
being one of Sarah's best friends, I definitely have my experience of that too.
I have to just say that I felt when I was in the hospital that because she felt like she could leave because she knew that Sarah was being cared for by you. Sorry.
That's all right. It's a whole week of this shit. Thank you.
But it's true. I mean, no mother can leave her child unless she feels like
It's the hardest
she's cared
part.
for.
It's the
And she
hardest
just
part.
didn't. She didn't until you came and you were there, and she could see that, and she felt it, and she felt all of that love, and she felt like there are people in this world who love my child as much as I do. They might not leave toys in little paper sacks with every name of the day of the week for the next,
I washed
25
Sarah's
years.
jeans the other day, and a bunch of people did her laundry. She still needs people to do her dirty underwear.
But she knew that.
Give her clean underwear. She ran out of socks. We were going to buy socks for her. No,
Anyway.
Yeah, but also she wanted to live.
I know she did.
I said to her, no, to her, oy, God. Right after she died, I turned to Kolya and I said, is er gerechtigheid in de Welt? Is er gerechtigheid in de Welt? Is there any such thing as justice in the world, you know? I mean, like, what kind of a world is there justice in, like this? And he said, sie ist gewesen ein Symbol für Gerechtigkeit. Verstehst?
This is a symbol for justice?
Sie ist gewesen ein Symbol für,
She.
was a symbol for justice.
Well, I think,
Sie lernt sich Yiddish.
I think, so, how do you say is?
Is.
Is. So she is.
Sie ist noch als
Yeah.
a symbol for Gerechtigkeit. Efter hat gesagt is. Maybe he said is. But like the point is that, she spent her life as justice. Something that Jonathan said. I don't know if he said it here. I don't know if he said it today. He said it at the funeral in California. He said, she made a decision at some point to stop writing about history and studying history and to become history. Did he say that today? Okay. Yeah. To make it.
The one time it was when you were really like your second year at Claes Canada.
Are you a singer?
I do
Yes,
sing.
she sings.
Um,
She's smart enough to not try to make a living from it.
She was teaching a class of mostly older people, and she invited Daniel to come in and play for this class. And she said to these older women mostly, I want you to listen to this next singer and set aside all of your preconceived notions because you may hear a word that isn't what you're used to hearing. It may be
Forgive
a
the
little,
expletive, she said.
That's what it was, forgive the expletive. She says, but this is what happens when we turn the music over to the young people and we turn the language over to them and let them have it and make it their own. And if we don't, it will die. And so let it breathe and let them take it and run with it, and this is what they do.
And what did you say?
It was the first song I ever translated, actually. Holjet Holjet Beze Winden by Avram Rezen, which is a song, yeah, and it was the first thing of mine that Adrian really dug.
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
Is it the one?
No. You want the English? So yeah, this was the first song that I ever translated out of Yiddish into an English that I can sing. It's the first song on the first record I made with my band. And it's the first song that I ever showed her that she really said that she liked and had me sing at this thing. It was written in 1900 by Avram Rezen in Warsaw. It was originally called Zum Winter, but it's also known as Holjet Holjet Beze Winden. And the last line of it says, Lang wird dauern der Winter, Sommer ist noch weit. Winter will last a long time, summer is far off. And when the Bundists sang it, and then later when it was sung by partisans in the Warsaw Ghetto, they would sing, Lang wird dauern nicht der Winter, Sommer ist nicht weit. winter won't last long, summer is not far. So I sang it. It goes, ooh. It's usually sung like chorally with a big workers' chorus, but I sing it kind of like with a rock band, essentially. Juliet, Juliet, böse Winden, frei beherrscht die Welt. Brecht die Zweigen, warf die Bäume, tut, was euch gefällt. Brecht die Zweigen, warf die Bäume, tut, was euch gefällt. Treibt die Vögel von die Felder und verjagt sie fort. Die, was kennen weit nicht fliehen, tät sie auf den Ort. Die, was kennen weit nicht fliehen, tät sie auf den Ort. Reißt die Ludden von die Heißlech und reißt die Ludden von die Heißlech. Scheiben brecht Reus. Brennt a Lichtel, gets dunkel, lässt mit Zorn aus. Brennt a Lichtel, gets dunkel, lässt mit Zorn aus. Wailing, wailing, winds of evil play upon the land. Fell the trees and break the branches by your raging hand. Treibt die Vögel. Rouse the birds from quiet meadows. Let them seek to fly. If a wing is weak or broken, crush them as they try. Rend the doors off all the hinges. Shatter every pane. If in darkness shines a flicker, kill that fucking flame. Wailing, wailing, winds of evil, while your time is nigh, long will winter keep the light of summer from the sky. Juliet, Juliet, böse Winden, jetzt ist eure Zeit, lang wird dauern der Winter, Sommer ist noch weit. Lang wird dauern, nicht der Winter, Sommer ist nicht weit.
So beautiful. So beautiful.